Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Coffee Conversations with Forge Breast Cancer Survivor Center. I'm Janita Holt, and today we are here with Javacia, Javacia Harris Bowser, the founder of CJ Wright, today on our Coffee Conversation. So thank you for everyone for tuning in with us this morning, and thank you for joining us today, Javacia. And we're so excited about this conversation today.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat with everyone today.
Awesome. So just jumping right into it, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey with breast cancer?
Yes, so as she mentioned, my name is Javacia Harris Bowser, and I am a freelance writer, blogger, entrepreneur. I live in Birmingham, and I was diagnosed with breast cancer in January of 2020 at the age of 38. And I went in for a mammogram just because my doctor thought that I should get one before age 40 because of family history. But really, I was just going as a baseline. Like, I wasn't nervous or scared or anything. And then, yeah. and the doctor said, well, we see something, so we need to take another look. And so that mammogram led to another mammogram. All this happened in the same day. We did another mammogram, and then an ultrasound, and then a biopsy, and then a week later, I was told I had breast cancer. So obviously that completely turned my world upside down. And then a couple of months later, the world turned upside down because of the pandemic. So I had to go through treatment during a global pandemic. So yeah, 2020 was a lot, to say the least.
I can only imagine having to go, just getting that news in general, right? But then pandemic, hits. What was that experience like, getting that diagnosis and then the pandemic hitting? Like, what was that like?
So the hardest part was having to do everything by myself because my surgery was actually in February. And so my husband was able to be there with me for that. But then the pandemic hit in March, and initially I was told I wasn't going to need chemo. And then later that my doctors were like, oh, my bad, you do need chemo. And so when I had to go in for surgery to get my chemo port placement, my husband had to literally drop me off at the curb because he wasn't allowed to come into the hospital because of COVID restrictions. So to go from him being by my side, holding my hand, to the moment I went under, to go from that to he had to drop me off at the curb, that was a lot. That was a big difference, and it was very, very lonely. And then obviously, I had to go to every chemo treatment alone. I had to go to every radiation treatment alone. So that was the hardest part, just being alone going through all of that. And also not having things like going out to dinner or meeting up with friends to look forward to. So it was just, so for a year, it was just hospital, home, hospital, home. That was my life for a year.
So how did you cope? What did you do to help get you through all of those different challenges?
Well, it was the walking and writing, which we're here to talk about today. And I am a woman of faith, so my faith and prayer helped a lot. And my husband was amazing. I just can't say enough about how great he was during the whole thing. But really, emotionally and mentally and even physically, writing and walking helped so much. So I've been a writer since I could sit up straight, according to my mother. And I've always used writing to process things, help me understand the world, help me understand myself. I use writing to figure out what I think about things. And so I was doing that. I was using journaling to kind of process everything that was going on. But to be honest, eventually that wasn't enough. Like just writing about my feelings wasn't enough, because often my feelings were very dark and twisty. And so just writing that was not enough. So I actually did something called scripting, which is where you write out like the future that you want, but you write it as if it already is. And so I started doing that a lot in my journaling time. And so I would write about how, my treatments were over and they were, successful, and I was still healthy and still happy, and how I was still a successful writer, even though I was going through treatment and all of this. And I wrote about having chemo creativity instead of chemo brain and all of this stuff, right? And so that would lift my spirits when I would write this future that I desired for myself, but write it as if it already is. And there's actually psychology behind scripting, because your brain doesn't know what's real and what isn't, right? So if you write, I am a millionaire, and, you keep writing that and keep writing that, your brain thinks you're a millionaire, right? And so then you feel like a millionaire, even though you're still sitting in your 1-bedroom apartment, right? but you feel better, right? So the same thing. So it works the same way with anything. And so that scripting lifted my spirits. But, and research has shown this too, another thing about scripting is that it helps you actually make those things come true. Because when your brain starts believing that something is true, your brain also looks for things to make it real. And so that's why people tell you, a lot of coaches will tell you to write your goals as true statements, instead of saying, I want to be a New York Times bestseller. You write, I am a New York Times bestseller. And your brain starts to look for things that will make that true. And so I started doing a lot of scripting, and that really, really helped. And I'm happy to say that everything that I scripted during treatment, it all came true. And so that's the writing part. The walking part, so at the beginning of the year, I had already decided that I was going to walk for exercise. So walk for exercise. So walking around Target while you're shopping for stuff you don't need doesn't count. I was going to walk for exercise for at least 30 minutes every single day in 2020. I had already made that resolution before my diagnosis. And so then when the diagnosis came, the overachiever in me even asked my doctor, I asked my doctor 2 questions. I said, can I still work? Can I still walk every day? And she's like, what? That's really your first question to me. So I decided, okay, I'm still going to walk every day in spite of this. And I did. I walked the day of my surgery, which probably wasn't a good idea, but I did it anyway. Yeah. My husband was not happy about that. I actually snuck out of the house. That's how I did it. I waited till he went to the bathroom, and I snuck out of the house.
Classic.
But because I just had surgery, I was walking really slowly, and so of course he caught me. So he comes running out of the house, and he's like, Javacia! But
that's awesome, though. I mean, you're determined.
I was very determined. And, and when I started chemo, my oncologist actually said, being physically active at least 20 minutes every day will help you through treatment. And so for me, that was just kind of confirmation that, that my crazy goal was actually not so crazy. And so I stuck with it. I walked every single day in 2020. Even, after my lumpectomy, after my chemo port placement, after my first dose of chemo. And, in some of those days, it was really hard. Walking 30 minutes felt like walking 30 miles some days. But it made me just feel more like myself. It grounded me. And because when you're going through cancer treatments, you constantly feel like you're floating above your body, just watching this happen to someone else. And walking helped ground me, and it helped me, like I said, feel more like myself. It gave me my power back in a small way. And so that's why it was so important for me to do it. It wasn't even really about the physical things, the way that my doctor said it would help me physically, because she said it would help with fatigue and all of that. That's honestly not why I was doing it. I was just doing it because it helped me feel better emotionally and mentally.
Well, I mean, and that's powerful though. I mean, I could easily see how something like that would cause you to drift away from everything that would seem normal, because at that point nothing is normal.
Yeah.
So to have the willpower to say, this is not going to change. This is not going to change because this is something that I'm doing and nothing can change that. I think that's super powerful. And I know you mentioned you asked if you could still work. Not the ideal question when you get that diagnosis. So I know that you are the founder of CJ Wright. So could you tell us a little bit about that? What is CJ Wright?
So CJ Wright is a website and community for women who write and blog. I started it in 2011, not as a business. It started out as just me and like 10 other women meeting for tacos, because every good story starts with tacos. So it was just us meeting for tacos to talk about writing. And that's really all I thought it would be. But then it grew into something much bigger. And so now it's a business that has a paid membership program. I also do coaching and consulting. I do workshops and e-courses, and we have members. It started out as a local thing for just women in Birmingham. Now we have members all over the country and even in other countries. I like to say we have members from Birmingham to Barbados. So
That's awesome.
So yeah, it's grown quite a bit.
So on your website, I know it mentions about how balancing different roles can be challenging, especially for women who may want to write. Can you give us a little bit about how they can kind of navigate through those personal and professional priorities, so that they can, start writing, not even just as it relates to, blogging or whatever have you not, but if they choose to use this as a coping mechanism, if this is something that they would be helpful, what are some recommendations that you will have for those groups of women or men?
Yeah, so I think, it depends on what you want to do with writing. So if you are using it just as a coping mechanism, like you were saying, then it's really about scheduling time for self-care then, because if writing is something that you're doing to cope, then it's your self-care. And so you just have to prioritize that and treat it like, just like you would have to prioritize exercise if you're trying to get healthy, and prioritize cooking healthy meals at home and things like that. So just build it into your schedule, whether it's just journaling for 15 minutes first thing in the morning, or 15 minutes before bed, or maybe 15 minutes during your lunch break. Just build it into your schedule. And honestly, that's the same advice I give to people who want to pursue writing on a more professional level, but they're still working their, W-2 job. You've got to be intentional about it. You've got to schedule that time in to write. And if it is something that you're interested in on a professional level, it's important to set specific goals as well, and then work toward those goals during that writing time that you have scheduled for yourself each day. So really, to sum it up, it's just really about being intentional.
Yeah. And I can definitely see how, that would be. Um, it's more so like a time management thing, right? Like more so self-aware and just really identifying what self-care looks like for you. So if writing is something that you think would be, a self-care mechanism or a coping mechanism, or even walking, that needs to be something that you would, try and see how you can schedule that throughout your day.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and I
absolutely.
think that's great. Yeah, for sure. And as I imagine, you've talked with so many people, you've helped so many people, just inspiring them through your story. And then through CJ Wright's, are there any meaningful stories you can share with us about an event or collaboration that you've worked with so far?
Just in general, it's been really so I wasn't initially going to talk about my diagnosis. I mentioned that at first I was told I wasn't going to need chemo. And so I had planned to just keep my diagnosis a secret because I was like, well, no one needs to know. And so, obviously my husband and my parents and brother and really close friends knew, but I wasn't really planning to tell anybody else. But then when I was told I need chemo, I knew I was going to have to tell everybody because I'm very visible, even though we were in quarantine and so everybody's at home. Because of CJ Wright, I'm always on social media and, I go live and I do like virtual workshops and everything. So I would be very visible, even though I was at home. And people who have known me for years, know, or even if you just knew me prior to cancer, you know that I had very, very long, thick hair. I was like, people called me like the girl with the hair. And so to go from the girl with the hair to no hair, like people were kind of gonna know something was happening. And yeah, I could have bought a wig, but no, I hate wigs. So not saying I hate wigs on other people. I hate wearing wigs. Like it's just, I just can't. Um, so that was not gonna work out. So I knew I had to tell people. And I'm really glad I did because by telling people, showing up in spite of what was going on, that's what seemed to really inspire people, both people who were also going through cancer treatments, and people who were just going through life, like just the fact that I was still showing up in spite of, I just threw my head wrap on and kept it going, right? And I was still showing up, and that inspired them to keep showing up for themselves, to keep showing up for their dreams in spite of other things that they had going on. As far as specific things, I got to share my story with Rethink Breast Cancer, which is a breast cancer organization that's actually based in Canada, oddly enough. But they specifically work with women, young women who've been diagnosed. So I got to share my story with them. BHAM Now, which is a publication here in Birmingham, they interviewed me specifically about my experience at Brookwood Medical Center, which is where I had my surgeries and all of my treatments. And they were fantastic. I love them so much. And so I got to talk about how wonderful they are. And also, I was interviewed by Oprah Magazine because of my walking every day. So, so that was pretty exciting. So, and most recently, I've been doing some work with Tiger Lily Foundation, which is a nonprofit specifically for education, awareness, advocacy, support of young women affected by breast cancer. So I've been doing some work with them as well. So yeah. And now
Wow.
I'm doing this.
And we thank you so much for doing this with us. So, a lot of silver lining in everything that you said. And I think it was just so spot on when you said it's applicable to life, right? Showing up in spite of, every situation can relate to that. Like I'm showing up in spite of, in spite of this going on or that going on. And I just appreciate you for showing up because of the inspiration that you've given to all of those that you've touched.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Yeah, I actually would like to share a quote from Iyanla Van Zant. And this quote just really confirmed and affirmed for me that sharing my story was the right thing to do. And the quote is, "When you stand and share your story in an empowering way, your story will heal you and your story will heal somebody else." And I just really feel like that quote right there sums up my whole experience of sharing my cancer story, because it was healing for me too. Because again, it gave me that sense of taking my power back. And also, it made me feel like the stuff I was going through had a purpose, because I was able to share it and encourage someone else. Again, whether that was someone who was also going through cancer treatment or someone who was just going through a really rough time in life. It made it feel purposeful because I was able to help somebody else with that story. And so that made me feel empowered and it helped heal me. And then I was also able to help heal someone else. So,
Wow.
so I say all that to say, share your story, and find your thing. Like walking and writing may not be your thing, but figure out what your thing is. Like, what is the thing that you can do to move your body that makes you feel grounded, happy, alive, whatever. Maybe it's dancing. That's something else that I do. Or maybe it's cycling or golf or whatever. Just find your thing so that you can move your body, but also find your way of sharing your story. So maybe it's not in a very like public platform like social media. Maybe it's just sharing with someone one-on-one, like writing somebody a letter. When I was first diagnosed, a woman who's actually a part of my CJ Wright community, she wrote me a letter about her own experience of being diagnosed when she was very young. I mean, she was in her 20s when she was diagnosed. And she wrote me this letter that was the most amazing thing that she could have done, because in the letter, she kept saying, "You will do this again and this again." And she would just name things that she knew I love to do. Like she's like, "You will go to Beyonce concerts again. You will, go on girls trips again." And it was just so empowering and I needed it so much. And so that was a way she was sharing her story in an empowering way that helped heal me. But it was, it was private. She didn't have to do it in a public manner. So if you are a private person, there's still a way for you to share your story and help other people.
Well, thank you so much, Javacia, for joining us today and sharing your story with us. And I'm sure that even this conversation is going to inspire someone. So thank you for joining us for our coffee conversation today. And we hope to see you again very soon.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.